The sister who was cut out of the family photo. Have you noticed? Every powerful family writes its own legend. They choose which faces are allowed to appear, they choose which stories are allowed to be told, and they also choose a few names that must disappear as if they never existed. The Kennedy family is the perfect example of that kind of legend. People remember the football photo shoots at High-Nisport, the lavish parties, the radiant smiles at the White House, but behind that glossy facade, there was a sister in the family who was turned into a secret. A sister who underwent lobotomy surgery at the age of 23, hidden in treatment facilities for 20 years without a single visit from her family, and erased from official records to the point that even her siblings didn't know where she was or whether she was alive or dead. Her name is Rosemary Kennedy. Before we begin the video, I want to explore some issues concerning Rosemary Kennedy. If you are born into a family where perfection is mandatory, do you have the right to be vulnerable? Oh, how many tragedies begin simply because a powerful person thinks they know better. If a decision for the common good destroys a person, is it still justified? Is a 20-year silence still protective or complicit? Who truly bears the consequences of decisions made by powerful people? Is a family's true legacy power or the wounds they leave behind? Let's explore together, and the surprise is at the end of the video. Rosemary was the eldest daughter in the family, born in 1918, and from the moment of her birth, her fate was sealed by a decision that was procedurally correct, but biologically wrong. On September 13, 1918, in Brookline, Massachusetts, Rose Kennedy went into labor at the worst time in American medical history. The Spanish flu pandemic, the hospital was overwhelmed. Her obstetrician was unavailable. And in a panic, a nurse did what was considered proper procedure at the time. She instructed Rose Kennedy to clamp her legs together, hold the baby in place, and wait for the doctor to arrive. Can you imagine? While contractions were coming in, the baby's head was already emerging, and the mother was told to hold on. According to major biographical sources, that period lasted nearly 2 hours, although some historians debate the exact number. But the crucial point is, during that time the baby was trapped in the birth canal, deprived of oxygen right as its brain was forming. The doctors didn't arrive in time. By the time Rosemary was finally born, the damage had already occurred. Today, modern medicine calls this hypoxic brain injury in newborns. It can lead to intellectual disability, motor developmental delays, and lasting limitations. As Rosemary grew older, the family received a gentler term, an accident in the womb. Sounds like a pain-relieving statement, right? But the truth is, the procedure was followed, and it was the procedure that broke a child's life. When Rosemary was 2, what her parents were usually proud of had become a source of fear in the Kennedy household. She struggled to seek, crawl, and walk. Slow to develop fine motor skills, slow to reach almost every milestone. And while Rosemary struggled with each small step, her siblings born close together were, in the Kennedy family's production line, the children began to surpass her in every respect. Jack was born just a year after Rosemary, then Kathleen, then Eunice, one by one, and this is the part that makes the story chilling. For Joseph Kennedy, Rosemary's father, that slowdown wasn't just a difference. He saw it as a crack in the image. Joseph Kennedy was a man who refused to accept limitations. He rose from the status of a despised Irish Catholic to a Wall Street tycoon, then power in Hollywood, then the American ambassador. He refused to give up. He refused to accept weakness, and he certainly couldn't stand the fact that his eldest daughter couldn't become a reflection of Kennedy ambition. Rosemary was sent to public school, but struggled so much that she was held back several times, watching her friends move on while she was held back. The family kept moving her from school to school, boarding, convent, from one place to another. Do you see that loop? It wasn't about finding the right place for Rosemary. It was about finding a place that could fix Rosemary. But some things don't need fixing, they just need to be understood. Then, in 1938, There was a rare moment in Rosemary's life when she touched the light. Joseph Kennedy was appointed the American ambassador to Great Britain. The whole family moved to London, including their daughter, whom they had always worried about and been ashamed of for not being perfect. There, Rosemary attended a convent school run by the Assumption Sisters at Belmont House. The curriculum was Montessori, learning through experience, personalized pace, teaching practical life skills instead of rigorous academic competition. And for the first time, Rosemary was placed in an environment designed for her, not against her. She progressed. Even though Rosemary was older than the other students, she was given a role that changed her self-perception. Teaching assistant to Mother Isabel, the head of the school. It sounds small, but for a girl who had been considered a problem for years, being trusted with responsibility was revolutionary. She was needed, she was useful, she was contributing. During her time in London, Rosemary was able to read with more confidence. Her favorite book was Winnie the Pooh, one of the few she could read fluently. She read to the children with expression and emotion as if she were truly telling a story. And you know what? The feeling of "I can do it" sometimes saves a person longer than medicine. The culmination of this period was in 1938, when Rosemary was presented to the British royal family along with her sister Kathleen. The ceremony required a complex bow before the king and queen, before the nobility and the camera lenses. Rosemary practiced for hours. Practiced until her feet ached, practiced until every movement became a bodily reflex, and when the moment came, she performed perfectly. The camera captured her radiant smile afterward, in a white dress and feathers, a girl who had proven to the world and to herself that she could do what others thought she couldn't. Rosemary's diary recorded afternoon teas, dances, concerts, outings with young men, the ordinary joys of a young girl. Perhaps that was the only time in Rosemary Kennedy's life she lived like a normal person, without comparison, without being judged as a fault in her family. Then the war came. In 1939, Germany advanced across Europe. Joseph Kennedy decided to bring the whole family back to America. Rosemary begged him. She begged him not to take her away from Belmont House, the only place where she had ever found stability, purpose, and happiness. But Joseph dragged her along anyway. He prioritized safety over his daughter's meaningful life. He prioritized logic over the blossoming she had just begun to experience. And that decision would lead to a collapse that he said he feared, but which he actually anticipated. And that was just the beginning. Rosemary Kennedy wasn't erased because she did something wrong. She was erased because she didn't fit in with a family obsessed with perfection. But the terrifying thing is, there was a time when Rosemary almost had a normal life, and that's when the real tragedy began. When the light goes out, when Rosemary returned to America, the first thing that disappeared wasn't her ability to study. It was her sense of security. The environment Rosemary had just built in London, where she was understood, trusted, and needed, was shattered by a single decision from her father. Belmont House vanished from her life as if it had never existed, and with it, the fragile stability Rosemary had spent nearly 20 years striving for also dissolved. The change happened so quickly that it frightened even the Kennedy family. In her personal diary, Rose Kennedy recorded in a cold, almost clinical tone, "The skills she had painstakingly acquired in London gradually disappeared. Her gentle nature gave way to tension and agitation. She flew into a rage. She screamed, she threw things, she smashed vases. At times she attacked those around her with enough force to cause injury. She experienced seizures, a sign that this was more than just a behavioral problem." Rosemary also began sneaking out at night. For a family obsessed with image like the Kennedys, this wasn't just worry, it was a nightmare. They imagined Rosemary meeting the wrong person, a scandal, a pregnancy, an indelible stain on the political path they had laid out for their sons. But what Joseph and Rose Kennedy didn't want to face was this. What Rosemary was experiencing was very likely the emergence of mental illness superimposed on a pre-existing intellectual disability, the shock of being deprived of a stable environment, hormonal changes during adulthood, genetic facts in a family where many members would later struggle with depression, addiction, and psychological disorders. Rosemary needed treatment. Patience, special care was needed, and the Kennedys, if there was anything they didn't lack, it was money and the power to do the right thing. But Joseph Kennedy had never been patient with what he considered mistakes. His whole life he solved problems with money, influence, and threats. He bought elections, manipulated the market, suppressed scandals before they even made the news, and now in his eyes his daughter had become a problem. Joseph began searching for doctors, for surgeons, not to treat her, but to control her. In the fall of 1941, he heard of a new method, touted as a miracle of modern medicine, prefrontal lobe resection. This procedure was championed by doctors Walter Freeman and James Watts, who promised it could transform difficult-to-manage patients into obedient, quiet, and easily manipulated individuals. The American Medical Association had clearly warned at the time. The method was too experimental, the consequences were serious, and it should not be applied on a large scale. Joseph Kennedy didn't care. The doctors told him that after the surgery, Rosemary would be calmer. No more sneaking out, no more outbursts, no more threats to his son's political careers. That was enough. He didn't tell his wife. He didn't ask his children. He didn't seek a second opinion from doctors who might advise him to stop. He simply arranged for the surgery that would destroy his daughter's brain. On November 20th, 1941, 23-year-old Rosemary Kennedy was admitted to George Washington University Hospital in Washington, D.C. She wasn't told what she was about to undergo. She remained fully conscious throughout the operation. 2 holes were drilled into her skull. A spoon-like device called a lobotomized was inserted into her brain. Doctors began cutting connections in the frontal lobe, the area that controls personality, judgment, and emotions. While they were cutting, they asked Rosemary to sing "God Bless America." As they cut deeper, they told her to recite the Lord's Prayer. As they continued to destroy more neural pathways, they told her to count down from 100. Each of Rosemary's responses was a measure of the extent of brain damage. When her speech became jumbled, they continued cutting. When she could no longer form complete sentences, they continued. They only stopped when Rosemary became completely silent. The surgery lasted about an hour, but the consequences lasted a lifetime. When Rosemary woke up, the person she once was gone. She couldn't walk, she couldn't speak in complete sentences, she had no control over her bladder or bowels. Her intellectual capacity had regressed to that of a 2-year-old. The procedure promised as a solution had rendered her utterly helpless, and Joseph Kennedy's first reaction wasn't regret. It was concealment. London showed Rosemary how well she could live, and that's why, when she was pulled from there, she collapsed faster than anyone ever thought. The tantrums, the outbursts of anger, the night she sneaked out. In the eyes of the Kennedy family, Rosemary was no longer a girl in need of help. She became a danger. And when a powerful family sees their daughter as a danger, they don't seek to heal, they seek to eliminate. Disappearing from the world after the surgery, Rosemary was no longer the problem that Joseph Kennedy had feared. She became a secret that needed to be kept deeply hidden. Joseph's first action wasn't to bring his daughter home, nor was it to find the best rehabilitation plan. Instead, it was to find a place discreet enough so that no one would see the consequences of his decision. Rosemary was transferred to Craig House, a private psychiatric hospital in Beacon, New York. It wasn't known for its advanced treatment methods, it was known for something else: absolute silence. Craig House catered to wealthy families who wanted to erase a loved one from public life without attracting attention. Rosemary wasn't allowed to socialize with other patients. She lived alone in a small house on the grounds. She didn't participate in any activities. No social contact, no public appearances. Big daughter of the former American ambassador. Even more terrifying. For 8 years, from 1941 to 1949, none of Rosemary's siblings knew where she was. No John F. Kennedy, no Robert, no Eunice, who had once been closest to Rosemary. Joseph Kennedy said nothing to them. He lied. He orchestrated the silence meticulously. And what about Rose Kennedy? The mother begged to see her daughter. Her husband reassured her that visits would agitate Rosemary, that she is adjusting, that it is best to leave her alone. The truth was much simpler. Joseph Kennedy did not dare let his wife see what he had done. He allowed a surgery to take place behind her back, he destroyed their daughter without her mother's consent, and he knew that if Rose saw Rosemary now, she would never forgive him. In 1949, after Craig House became embroiled in allegations of sexual abuse of patients, Joseph moved Rosemary again. This time to St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children in Jefferson, Wisconsin, a small remote town where the Kennedy name carried no weight. He had a separate house built for Rosemary, isolated even from the other disabled students at the school. The ban on contact with her family remained in place. For 20 years, from 1941 to 1961, none of her siblings visited, not a single family letter. Her mother was prevented from seeing her own daughter. Joseph Kennedy told different stories to each person. To one person, Rosemary preferred to live in seclusion. To one person, she was teaching in the Midwest. To another, she was fine, but needed space. Each lie was designed to block out the question, to block out the investigation, to block out the truth that the man behind the model American family had removed his daughter's brain lobes and locked her away to protect his political ambitions. Meanwhile, his sons rose through the ranks. John Kennedy was elected to the House of Representatives, then the Senate, then President of the United States in 1960. Throughout that journey, his eldest sister sat in a small house in Wisconsin, relearning how to walk, speaking in short, fragmented sentences, living a life that her own family had erased from collective memory. Joseph Kennedy thought he had succeeded until history turned back in a cruel way. On December 19, 1961, exactly 20 years after Rosemary's surgery, Joseph Kennedy suffered a severe stroke while playing golf in Palm Beach. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He could not speak. He could not control his own body. The man who had silenced his daughter was now silenced himself. And for the first time in 2 decades, Joseph Kennedy was no longer in control of his family. That surgery didn't end when the doctor closed the incision. It ended when Rosemary could no longer speak. And the first thing her father did after seeing the results was not regret, but concealment. Rosemary Kennedy did not die on the operating table, but from that moment, she began to disappear from the world. Disappearing from the world after the surgery, Rosemary was no longer the problem that Joseph Kennedy had feared. She became a secret that needed to be kept deeply hidden. Joseph's first action wasn't to bring his daughter home, nor was it to find the best rehabilitation plan. Instead, it was to find a place discreet enough so that no one would see the consequences of his decision. Rosemary was transferred to Craig House, a private psychiatric hospital in Beacon, New York. It wasn't known for its advanced treatment methods, it was known for something else: absolute silence. Craig House catered to wealthy families who wanted to erase a loved one from public life without attracting attention. Rosemary wasn't allowed to socialize with other patients. She lived alone in a small house on the grounds. She didn't participate in any activities. No social contact, no public appearances. Be daughter of the former American ambassador. Even more terrifying. For 8 years, from 1941 to 1949, none of Rosemary's siblings knew where she was. No John F. Kennedy, no Robert, no Eunice, who had once been closest to Rosemary. Joseph Kennedy said nothing to them. He lied. He orchestrated the silence meticulously. And what about Rose Kennedy? The mother begged to see her daughter. Her husband reassured her that visits would agitate Rosemary, that she is adjusting, that it is best to leave her alone. The truth was much simpler. Joseph Kennedy did not dare let his wife see what he had done. He allowed a surgery to take place behind her back. He destroyed their daughter without her mother's consent. And he knew that if Rose saw Rosemary now, she would never forgive him. In 1949, after Craig House became embroiled in allegations of sexual abuse of patients, Joseph moved Rosemary again. This time to St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children in Jefferson, Wisconsin, a small remote town where the Kennedy name carried no weight. He had a separate house built for Rosemary, isolated even from the other disabled students at the school. The ban on contact with her family remained in place. For 20 years, from 1941 to 1961, none of her siblings visited, not a single family letter. Her mother was prevented from seeing her own daughter. Joseph Kennedy told different stories to each person. To one person, Rosemary preferred to live in seclusion. To one person, she was teaching in the Midwest. To another, she was fine, but needed space. Each lie was designed to block out the question, to block out the investigation, to block out the truth that the man behind the model American family had removed his daughter's brain lobes and locked her away to protect his political ambitions. Meanwhile, his sons rose through the ranks. John Kennedy was elected to the House of Representatives, then the Senate, then President of the United States in 1960. Throughout that journey, his eldest sister sat in a small house in Wisconsin, relearning how to walk, speaking in short, fragmented sentences, living a life that her own family had erased from collective memory. Joseph Kennedy thought he had succeeded until history turned back in a cruel way. On December 19, 1961, exactly 20 years after Rosemary's surgery, Joseph Kennedy suffered a severe stroke while playing golf in Palm Beach. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He could not speak. He could not control his own body. The man who had silenced his daughter was now silenced himself. And for the first time in 2 decades, Joseph Kennedy was no longer in control of his family. That surgery didn't end when the doctor closed the incision. It ended when Rosemary could no longer speak. And the first thing her father did after seeing the results was not regret, but concealment. Rosemary Kennedy did not die on the operating table, but from that moment, she began to disappear from the world. The erected sister and an unexpected legacy. When the truth about Rosemary gradually emerged within the Kennedy family, it didn't create an immediate explosion, no press conference, no public apology, no confession to America, but it gnawed from within, especially at the younger brother who had risen to the highest position of power in the world. In February 1963, President John F. Kennedy delivered a special address to Congress on mental health and intellectual disability. The language of that speech was different from any previous one. He didn't talk about isolation. He didn't talk about burden management. He spoke about dignity. He called for halving the number of people confined to closed treatment facilities. He advocated for community-based care. He said that people with disabilities weren't a problem to hide, but citizens to be protected. Those words didn't come from political books. They came from a sister who had been cut off from her family. In October 1963, the Community Mental Health Act was passed by Congress and signed into law by JFK just 22 days before his assassination in Dallas. This act fundamentally changed American psychiatric policy, moving away from the model of confining people to remote institutions that had held Rosemary captive for 2 decades. But the most profound impact came from Rosemary's closest sister. Eunice Kennedy Shriver couldn't save her sister. That haunted her for life, and instead of turning her back, Eunice turned that pain into action. In 1962, she opened a small summer camp in her Maryland home for children with intellectual disabilities. That camp was called Camp Shriver. There was no pity, no segregation, only movement, joy, and a sense of recognition. 6 years later, that program evolved into the Special Olympics, officially launched in 1968. Today, the Special Olympics serves more than 4.7 million athletes in over 170 countries. Each of them lives on in history. Because Eunice couldn't save Rosemary by 1990, the youngest surviving sibling, Ted Kennedy Akon, sponsored the Americans with Disabilities Act, a law he called the Disability Liberation Proclamation, NICET's people with disabilities in America. More than 26 million Americans are legally protected by that law. And it all stemmed from a sister who was considered a shame. Rosemary Kennedy died on January 7, 2005. At the age of 86, she outlived her father, who had undergone a lobotomy. By more than 3 decades, she outlived her mother, who had been unable to protect her, by nearly 10 years. She outlived John, Robert, Kathleen, and Joe Jr. The person Joseph Kennedy tried to erase from history was the most enduring. When Rosemary passed away, her surviving siblings, Eunice, Jean, and Ted, were at her bedside. The family who had kept her hidden for 20 years were finally there to say goodbye to the sister they had been forbidden to know. Joseph Kennedy wanted to erase Rosemary because he feared she would threaten his son's political future. But Rosemary, in silence, in the shadows, became the invisible architect of a change that protected millions. There are those whose names are erased, but they refuse to disappear. Rach knees, no words, hang for the audience. Father suffers stroke, control system collapses. Mother reunites with her child after 20 years. Rosemary hits her mother, not out of hatred but because she feels abandoned. Lobotomy doesn't erase memories, only the ability to express who truly bears the consequences of power decisions. The ultimate paradox of a powerful family, the story of Rosemary Kennedy is not just a family tragedy. It is a moral paradox at the heart of the Kennedy myth, a family that built its image on words like progressive, compassionate, reformist, protective of the weak, but began by sacrificing the weakest member of the family. Joseph Kennedy believed he was doing what was necessary. In his logic, Rosemary was not a person to be understood, but a risk to be eliminated. He didn't hate his daughter, he loved his ambition more, and that is the most terrifying aspect of this story. There are no screaming demons, no outbursts of madness. Only a powerful, calm, rational father making a rational decision in his world. It is precisely this kind of decision that creates the most lasting disasters. Rosemary didn't die on the operating table. She lived, but she was stripped of her voice, her future, her youth, and her right to be present in her family. She was reduced to a void, that name never mentioned, a face cut out of a family photograph, and that void haunted those who remained. John F. Kennedy spoke of the dignity of people with disabilities, not because he read about it in a book, but because he knew the price of taking away that dignity. Eunice Kennedy Shriver didn't found the Special Olympics for a visual strategy, but because she couldn't bear the world treating children like her sister as worthless. Ted Kennedy didn't call the Americans with Disabilities Act a liberation manifesto by chance. He understood that his sister had lived her whole life in a form of legal imprisonment. Rosemary became something her father never anticipated, living proof of the moral limits of power. Joseph Kennedy wanted to control his family history, but history has a cruel habit. It always preserves what people try to erase. Ultimately, Rosemary, unable to speak, unable to campaign, unable to appear on camera, left a far deeper mark than many members of a family once celebrated nationwide. Her legacy lies not in words, it lies in the millions of people protected. Recognize a woman was once considered too flawed to exist. There are families that build power by concealing the truth, but that same truth, one day, will return and redefine their entire legacy. The person erased becomes a world changer. Rosemary has no voice, but influences national laws, mental health, policy, Special Olympics, disabilitation law. Enid Varden wants to erase his daughter, inadvertent creating a legacy greater than all. Is the true legacy of a family power, or the wounds they leave behind? Thank you all for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, like, leave a comment, and share it with everyone.